The Robe. In 1953, The Robe didn't merely premiere, it ignited a transformation in Hollywood's approach. As the earliest movie released in CinemaScope, it stretched across a 2.55:1 aspect ratio, dwarfing standard screens. With television luring away theatergoers, 20th Century Fox wagered everything on widescreen grandeur, and prevailed. The Robe amassed enormous box office receipts, surpassing many secular releases that year and securing a spot among the decade's top earners. Drawn from Lloyd C. Douglas's best-selling 1942 novel, the narrative follows Marcellus Gallio, a Roman tribune charged with supervising the crucifixion of Jesus. Richard Burton, whose Shakespearean intensity made him a natural choice, received an Academy Award nod for Best Actor. Gene Simmons portrayed Diana, lending emotional depth to the film's spiritual dimension, while Victor Mature's supporting performance set the stage for the sequel, Demetrius and the Gladiators, put into production within a year. The Robe wasn't merely a box office behemoth, it also became a cultural lightning rod. Released during a post-World War II wave of religious fervor in America, the film's pronounced spiritual themes resonated with audiences seeking moral clarity in a swiftly modernizing society. Certain reviewers dismissed its polished style, dubbing it a sermon in sandals. While others applauded its sincere depiction of redemption and faith, it secured 5 Academy Award nominations, including Best Picture, and clinched 2 for Best Art Direction and Best Costume Design. Behind the scenes, director Henry Koster grappled with the technological challenges of CinemaScope, which demanded revised blocking and lighting schemes, forcing directors to reimagine visual storytelling. Film scholars like David Bordwell later observed that pioneering widescreen works such as The Robe spurred filmmakers to reinvent on-screen space. There is conjecture that Fox's plunge into a religious epic was more than artistic, it was calculated. Some suppose the studio purposely tapped into America's mid-century moral landscape, hoping to attract church-going families and conservative viewers. Whether by conscious design or fortuitous timing, The Robe unleashed a torrent of subsequent biblical epics, from the Ten Commandments to Ben-Hur, positioning faith-driven fare as a box office powerhouse during the 1950s. King of Kings. In 1961, MGM unveiled King of Kings, a biblical spectacle that sparked controversy well before reaching theaters. The furor centered on the choice of Jeffrey Hunter, approximately 35 at the time, to portray Jesus Christ. Renowned for roles in The Searchers and various war dramas, Hunter's leading man allure drew immediate reproach. Commentators derided the film as, "I was a teenage Jesus," a barb that quickly saturated headlines and talk shows. The core dispute wasn't just his age, it was whether a Hollywood matinee idol could credibly embody one of history's most venerated figures. Director Nicholas Ray, fresh from Rebel Without a Cause, defied predictable norms. Rather than presenting Christ as a distant, divine icon, Ray opted for a more grounded take. He reportedly sought to depict Jesus as multidimensional, driven by empathy yet weighed down by inner conflict. This interpretation diverged sharply from earlier versions, like Cecil B. DeMille's 1927 The King of Kings, which leaned heavily on mysticism. Ray's Jesus lived among the downtrodden, confronted authority, and grappled with doubt, a vision that polarized viewers. To solidify this perspective, Ray recruited Orson Welles as narrator. Welles's unmistakable voice, already legendary from radio and film, brought immediate gravitas. Visually, the production ventured beyond typical bounds. Captured in widescreen CinemaScope and awash in vibrant Technicolor, it showcased sweeping desert panoramas and carefully assembled Roman sets. The grandeur wasn't mere showmanship, it was a deliberate effort to raise the bar for the genre. On the musical side, Miklos Rozsa, already recognized with 3 Academy Awards, earned significant acclaim for his score. Drawing on Hungarian folk motifs and classic liturgical elements, Rozsa supplied the film with a spiritual and emotional core. Some contemporary reviewers even asserted that his music overshadowed the acting. In American theaters, King of Kings drew significant attention, though reactions were split. Some applauded its earnestness and visual scope, while others criticized it as overly refined or lacking emotional warmth. Precise earnings remain uncertain, but the film supposedly performed well enough to become an Easter fixture on US television. Abroad, the reception was markedly tougher. It was reportedly banned in multiple countries, including Lebanon and Morocco, over concerns about depicting Jesus. Such prohibitions ignited diplomatic friction and revived worldwide arguments about religious portrayals in film. Many observers argue that the controversy only elevated the film's prominence, turning it into both a cultural powder keg and a cinematic landmark. In modern retrospectives, King of Kings persists as a daring effort in faith-driven cinema from the studio era, partially reverent, partially defiant, and thoroughly unforgettable. Quo Vadis. In 1951, MGM took a bold gamble on a sweeping Roman saga laden with clear Christian elements, Quo Vadis. With a budget ranging from $7.6 to $8.5 million, it ranked among the studio's priciest endeavors. Directed by Mervyn LeRoy and filmed in both Rome and Cinecittà Studios, the production depicted the repression of early Christians under Emperor Nero. Robert Taylor portrayed Marcus Vinicius, a Roman officer torn between duty to the empire and devotion to Lygia, a Christian played by Deborah Kerr. Yet it was Peter Ustinov's unhinged, capricious Nero who most captivated viewers, earning him a Golden Globe and reimagining the model of cinematic despots. The undertaking was formidable. Over 100 sets, 30,000 costumes, and legions of extras. Behind the scenes, turmoil simmered. Managing the enormous cast and crew caused repeated setbacks and ballooning expenses. Some insiders murmured of near revolts over script changes and 11th-hour revisions. In spite of such obstacles, Quo Vadis grossed over $21 million worldwide and garnered $11 million in domestic rentals, making it MGM's most lucrative release since Gone with the Wind. It also earned 8 Academy Award nominations, though it left empty-handed. Critics were conflicted. Some lauded its visual spectacle, while others criticized its loose approach to history. Regardless, its significance proved indisputable. Amid the early Cold War environment, the film's depiction of Christian martyrdom struck a chord as a metaphor for moral audacity under oppressive regimes. Although not the sole spark, Quo Vadis revitalized Hollywood's hunger for biblical epics, setting the stage for epics such as The Robe, Ben-Hur, and DeMille's retelling of the Ten Commandments. Rumor has it that studio executives positioned it as a spiritual counterbalance to emerging secular themes in post-war movies. Whether by intentional strategy or mere happenstance, Quo Vadis secured its status as a landmark of faith-focused cinema in that grand era, magnificent, devout, and undeniably lavish. The Song of Bernadette. In 1943, when world conflict loomed large, a serene spiritual film confounded Hollywood's assumptions. The Song of Bernadette, released by 20th Century Fox, focused on a French teenager's encounters with the Virgin Mary, a daring choice for a prominent studio of that era. Jones, then on the rise, won the Academy Award for Best Actress for her depiction of Bernadette Soubirous, a historical figure who claimed Marian apparitions in Lourdes in 1858. The movie was adapted from Franz Werfel's best-selling novel, inspired by the writer's own flight from Nazi-occupied France. Finding shelter in Lourdes, the Jewish refugee pledged to tell Bernadette's story should he survive, a vow that ultimately became both a literary triumph and a cinematic hit. The film earned 4 Oscars: Best Actress, Best Cinematography, Best Art Direction Interior Decoration, and Best Original Score. It also scored a Best Picture nomination, an uncommon honor for a religious feature at the time. Although the Vatican's official stance remains unclear, Catholic media throughout the United States commended the film's humble devotion. Several observers suggest this warm reception protected it from the usual doubts aimed at faith-based productions. Director Henry King's restrained direction bypassed spectacle, emphasizing genuine emotion. That approach may have recalibrated ideas about religious cinema, which rarely portrayed saints so humanely. Its success ostensibly paved the way for the religious biopic genre, long considered too marginal for major accolade attention. Rumor holds that studio executives initially hesitated, anxious that the subject might repel a broader audience. Instead, it resonated profoundly, offering viewers in wartime a rare measure of spiritual solace amid pervasive turmoil. Barabbas. In 1961, the biblical epic Barabbas veered markedly from the standard studio-era blueprint. While most religious films of that time emphasized pageantry and victory, Barabbas, starring Anthony Quinn, explored spiritual fallout instead. The narrative opens with a historical conundrum. Barabbas, a condemned criminal, is released as Jesus is sentenced to crucifixion. That instant, curbed directly from the 4 canonical Gospels, launches a tale rich in remorse, existential unease, and profound disquiet. Quinn, who had already drawn acclaim for roles in productions like La Strada, delivered a portrayal critics deemed fervent and deeply conflicted. One of the film's boldest decisions? Director Richard Fleischer captured the crucifixion scene during a real solar eclipse on February 15, 1961. The haunting natural darkness was no special effect. It was celestial timing. NASA archives confirm the eclipse's path over regions of Europe and Africa, perfectly aligning with the shoot in Italy. Filmed at Rome's Cinecittà Studios and encompassing genuine Roman ruins, the project favored historical authenticity over polished spectacle. Based on the novel by Swedish writer Per Lagerkvist, awarded the Nobel Prize in Literature in 1951, the movie grapples with theological mysteries that Hollywood typically skirted. In contrast to Ben-Hur or the Ten Commandments, Barabbas withholds a sweeping conclusion. Its mood is gloomier, its questions heavier. Certain critics labeled it grim, while others applauded its substance. Audiences across Europe were especially drawn to its moral complexity, and quiet talk still lingers. Others assert that filming amid an actual eclipse was more than a directorial flourish, implying a pursuit of genuine cosmic symbolism. Whether happenstance or something larger, Barabbas boldly examined what remains a belief once the marvel disappears. The Big Fisherman. Debuting in 1959, The Big Fisherman emerges as one of the more idiosyncratic offerings within the rush of mid-century biblical blockbusters. Instead of highlighting supernatural wonders or dramatic miracles, the film fixes its gaze on Simon Peter's inward turmoil, an uncommon psychological approach for a genre chiefly characterized by parted seas and blazing shrubs. Adapted from Lloyd C. Douglas's novel, it was conceived as a companion piece to his earlier hit, The Robe, aiming to illuminate a disciple frequently eclipsed by more prominent scriptural personalities. Directed by Frank Borzage, an Academy Award recipient from the silent film epic, and produced by Roland V. Lee, this endeavor conscientiously pursued spiritual introspection on the big screen. Howard Keel, venturing far from his typical musical realm, assumed the title role with unexpected subtlety. Known for his resonant voice in works like Seven Brides for Seven Brothers, Keel here opted for reserve and gravity. While reactions from critics varied, a number of commentators highlighted his surprising depth in portraying a man wrestling with belief and uncertainty. From a technical standpoint, the film was daring. Lensing in Super Panavision 70, a still nascent widescreen format, it presented expansive desert vistas and grand temple sets equal to its weighty themes. Cinematographer Lee Garms, who had earned an Oscar for Shanghai Express in 1932, contributed a painterly style, even though rumors of another Academy nomination proved unfounded. For all its scope and pedigree, The Big Fisherman never approached the widespread acclaim of Ben-Hur or the Ten Commandments. Many proposed that its quieter mood and character-centric plot made it less appealing in a market craving grandeur. Others cite its short theatrical run and limited studio support as factors in its eventual obscurity. Urban legends even hint that executives were uncomfortable with the production inclined more toward inner conflict than overt divine acts. Co-starring Susan Kohner and a youthful John Saxon, the movie remains difficult to find today, unrestored from modern media and seldom televised. For those seeking the overlooked regions of faith-based cinema from the classic studio era, The Big Fisherman supplies a fleeting, albeit elusive vantage into a moment when Hollywood dared to delve into the spirit behind the scripture. Francis of Assisi. In 1961, Michael Curtiz, best known for the wartime classic Casablanca, stepped away from smoky saloons and espionage plots to direct Francis of Assisi, a meditative biopic about the 13th century saint who gave up wealth for a life of radical simplicity. For Michael, whose career had been marked by sweeping dramas and on-set intensity, this faith-based project was a notable departure. Some suppose he saw in Francis a quiet counterpoint to his own forceful persona, a figure who led not with commands but with conviction. Shot partially in Assisi, Italy, the film adopted a restrained tone that mirrored its subject's humility. Unlike the grand biblical spectacles of the era, Francis of Assisi avoided theatrical excess, opting instead for historical reverence. Bradford Dillman portrayed the saint with restraint, earning praise for a performance the New York Times described as sincere and composed. Though it opened just months before the Second Vatican Council convened in October of 1962, The film's themes, peace, poverty, and spiritual renewal, felt uncannily aligned with the church's shifting focus. While it didn't dominate the box office, the film carved out a niche as one of Curtiz's final works. He passed away in April of 1962, less than a year after its release. His actual final film was The Comancheros, but Francis of Assisi remains a subtle epilogue from a director better known for cinematic thunder. Stories suggest that Curtiz may have been drawn to Francis not just as a subject, but as a kind of spiritual mirror. Whether that's truth or myth, the film still holds a soft but steady place in the golden age of faith-based cinema. The Ten Commandments. In 1956, Cecil B. DeMille's final directorial effort, The Ten Commandments, didn't simply resurrect the biblical epic. It unleashed a full-blown Hollywood spectacle. Clocking in at approximately 3 hours and 40 minutes, the film incorporated around 14,000 extras and an estimated 8,000 to 10,000 animals, making it one of the most logistically ambitious undertakings of the classic studio era. DeMille, then 74, reportedly experienced a heart attack on set, but returned within days. Certain reports mention he told crew members, "I will finish this picture if it kills me," a statement that's become mythic, whether or not he truly uttered it. Charlton Heston's casting as Moses wasn't solely about star power. DeMille believed Heston bore a striking resemblance to Michelangelo's sculpture of Moses in Rome, a detail the actor himself later affirmed. That visual parallel helped secure Heston's portrayal as something larger than life, precisely what the script required. The parting of the Red Sea endures as one of cinema's most legendary sequences. Special effects supervisor John P. Fulton devised it using slow-motion photography, reversed footage, and over 300,000 gallons of water poured into a U-shaped trough. The payoff? An Academy Award for Best Visual Effects, its only accolade out of 7 nominations. Financially, the film was a powerhouse. Distributed by Paramount, it became one of the highest-grossing pictures of the 1950s, trailing only Gone with the Wind in inflation-adjusted returns. Its 1966 re-release dominated box office charts yet again, a rarity for any movie, particularly a religious saga. Whisperings have persisted for years that DeMille intended to retire before embarking on this venture, but felt compelled by a spiritual calling to bring the narrative to the screen. Whether that choice was driven by conviction, desire for a lasting legacy, or a sheer cinematic panache, the result was a production that still airs annually and continues to define its genre. Noah's Ark. In 1928, Warner Brothers released Noah's Ark, a film that pushed the limits of early Hollywood, both technically and physically. Directed by Michael Curtiz, it was among the last of the silent epics, though it wasn't entirely silent. This hybrid of silent film and synchronized sound marked a turning point in cinema. But what truly set it apart wasn't its format, it was the flood. During the climactic deluge scene, over 600,000 gallons of water were unleashed on set. Dozens of extras were injured, and one long-circulated Hollywood rumor claims a performer lost a leg. Some even speculated that lawsuits followed, though official records remained scarce. The chaos reportedly helped fuel growing concerns about on-set safety, which would later become part of the conversation leading to the formation of the Screen Actors Guild in 1933. The film's structure interwove 2 timelines, one set during World War I, the other in ancient times, retelling the biblical story of Noah. Dolores Costello played Mary in the modern story and Miriam in the biblical one, while George O'Brien led the cast as the male protagonist. The dual-role concept wasn't common then, and added symbolic heft to the film's central warning, drawing a line from divine judgment to modern warfare. Despite mixed reviews and a production budget that nearly matched its box office earnings, Noah's Ark left a mark. It was more than a spectacle. It was a bold attempt to use faith-based storytelling as a moral mirror for a post-war generation. Ben-Hur. By the late 1950s, MGM was in dire financial straits. Yearning for a breakthrough, the studio pinned its hopes on a daring choice: a sumptuous remake of the 1925 silent epic Ben-Hur, A Tale of the Christ. With a production budget exceeding $15 million, it stood as the costliest film ever made at that moment. Had it failed, insiders murmured, MGM might have collapsed. Instead of dooming the studio, Ben-Hur revitalized it, amassing over $74 million domestically and becoming the decade's top-grossing picture. The movie's highlight, an 11-minute chariot race, was a logistical feat. Shot at Cinecittà Studios in Rome, the specially built stadium measured 1,500 feet around and accommodated 100,000 extras. Charlton Heston, playing Judah Ben-Hur, underwent extensive training to handle the horses himself. Although legendary stunt coordinator Yakima Canutt directed the action, Heston performed many of his own stunts, providing genuine impact to one of cinema's most perilous and celebrated sequences. Director William Wyler, famed for his exacting standards, wove subtle Christian symbolism into the narrative. Jesus' face is never shown, a deliberate move to preserve mystery and reverence. Instead, his presence resonates through silence, light, and the astonished gazes of those around him. Wyler reportedly quipped, "The less you see of him, the more powerful he becomes." Ben-Hur triumphed at the 1960 Academy Awards, capturing 11 Oscars, including Best Picture and Best Director. That record remained unbroken until Titanic equaled it in 1997, and years later, The Lord of the Rings, The Return of the King in 2004. Yet beyond the honors, the film struck a profound chord with Cold War-era viewers. Themes of redemption, forgiveness, and spiritual awakening echoed in a society overshadowed by ideological friction and nuclear fears. Over 300 sets were erected, countless costumes stitched, and tens of thousands of extras mobilized. The scope was nothing short of immense. Still, beneath the spectacle, the film's emotional anchor endured. A man's faith, shattered by treachery, renewed through grace. Numerous cinema scholars suggest that MGM's gamble wasn't purely fiscal. It was also devoted. In a season of turmoil, Ben-Hur offered a rarity, a grand spectacle that dared to wrestle with the divine. If you've enjoyed this video, please leave a like and comment. Also consider subscribing and hitting the notification bell to get notified of our new videos each week. Thanks for watching.